Starting with Lark. Today we are going to talk about the approaches and methods the teacher used for teaching English. First of all, we would learn approach. Approach means a set of principles or ideas about the nature of language teaching. There are basically different approaches for teaching English, but we are going to cover situational approach, structural approach, and functional approach. So first we are going to talk about situational approach. Situational approach is presented by Harold Palmer and A.S. Harby in 1930. The situational approach is also called oral approach. It's also called SLT approach, which means situational language teaching approach. Now we are going to talk about the characteristics of SLT approach. Students should be able to respond quickly and correctly. In this approach, language should be realistic. In this approach, we focused on the grammar rules like learning because we believe in this approach. It helps in learning. Here, the material is taught orally but presented to the students in a written form. Here, situations present to the students be the way to use the language. This approach moves from simple to complex level. This approach focuses on language. It could be a vocabulary and reading. When the students make mistake, the approach says that the teacher should be pointed that mistake and make them correct. This approach also demands that repeat what teacher speaks. This approach demands the structural practice of a language. In the summary of this approach, I would say this approach is used as giving the different situations to the students, and they would use the language in that situation. And this is the way how the students are going to learn the English. Number 2 approach we are going to discuss is structural approach. Structural approach is developed by Kripa K. Gautam. This approach believes the mastery of structures, which is very important, then acquisition of vocabulary. In this approach, vocabulary is not so important as the structure of a language or a sentence is more important. This approach believes language can be learned through scientific selection and grading process. Like slowly, we will learn the structure of a sentence. This approach starts with making a proper structure of a complete sentence. A complete sentence with their meanings. Sentence should be properly sequenced. Proper arrangement of the words should be in the sentence. Arranging the words in such a way to form a suitable pattern of sentence. This approach is learner-centered. This approach relies upon the oral approach, drill method, and situational approach. One has to learn a complete structure of the sentence for this. Like a complete structure of a sentence is subject plus verb plus object. Here the vocabulary is of no use. Objective of this approach is just the mastery of structure of the sentence. Summary is this approach focuses on a proper structure of a sentence. Now I'm going to link the structural or situational approach. In the situational approach, they demands grammar rules to be correct, vocabulary to be correct, punctuations and other rules should be correct. But in the structural approach, the structure of a sentence is more important than grammar, preposition, pronunciation, and vocabulary. The third approach is functional approach. This is presented by the American sociologist Dalkin Parson. In this approach, language is learnt by first seeing the new language in a context which shows its meaning and then practice it. But the practice should be in a controlled environment. Controlled environment means where the teacher or instructor would be there and students are going to practice that. But practicing is using it would be in the free condition. There would be no conditions from the teacher's side. This approach shifts us on doing by or practicing the language. In this approach, first we need to understand and then practice. Language is learned to express different functions, requesting or suggesting. This approach is also learner-centered as we discussed the structural approach, which was also learner-centered. There are basically three functions of functional approach. First is concept function. Concept function means understanding and the formation of a concept. The second function is communicative function. It's mean use of the language for various oral and written functions. Third is expressive function. It's mean using the language for expression of something. For example, can is to express the ability. May is used to making request. For example, ing, which means the sentence is still continue. So first in this approach we need to learn the words and their functions, that like where we are going to use that and how they are going to use that. Now we are going to talk about different methods for teaching English. The first is GTM, which means Grammar Translation Method. In this method, teacher plays a role which is active. This method is teacher-centered. Here, the student is passive. This method is for teaching foreign language. This method uses the translation and grammar study as main teachings. In this method, vocabulary and grammars are emphasized. Accuracy is most important in grammar translation method. In this method, students will learn the foreign language in their own native language. This method makes the student able to read the literature written in the target language. Here, the target language is the language the teacher wants to make their students learn. We have basically 4 skills of teaching any language: reading, writing, listening, and last is speaking. Reading skill is emphasized. Writing skill is done while reading. In this method, listening skill and speaking skill pays no attention. This grammar translation method neglects the speaking and listening skills. Now we are going to talk about the applications of the grammar translation method. First is we can use this method in the filling the blanks exercise. We can use this method for the vocabulary booklet. We can use this method for giving the students different passages and ask them to find out the antonyms and synonyms from that passage. Next method we are going to talk about is direct method. The direct method is also called phonetical method, reform method, anti-grammatical method. This method is connected directly to the target language without the translation into the native language, teaching the foreign language without the use of mother language or mother tongue. In the previous method, we discussed that how we can learn the foreign language with the help of native language. But in this direct method, as the name shows, we are going to learn the language without the translation of native language. We are going to learn directly the target language or the foreign language. The aim of direct method is the direct relation between the experience and language. This method helps the student to communicate in the target language. This direct method was introduced because of the dissatisfaction which was made with the older method, grammatical teaching method. In this method, vocabulary is taught by the demonstration method. Correct pronunciation and grammars are emphasized. Objects present in immediate classroom environment should be used to help the students understanding the language. Native language is not allowed to speak. 89% students will speak. Method is connected with the target language without the translation into the native language. Next method is audio-lingual method. This method is also called army method. Learning the foreign language by emphasizing on the learning grammatical and phonological structure, especially for speaking and listening. This means this audio-lingual method emphasizes on speaking and listening skills of a language and not considering the reading and writing skills. But the grammatical translation method focuses on reading and writing skills, not on the speaking and listening skills. The aim of audio-lingual method is to accurate the pronunciation of the students through the audio. Audio-lingual and the direct method both focused on the pronunciation and the ability of speaking, but it also focuses not on the vocabulary but also the grammatical sentence structure. In this audio-lingual method, learner is passive while the teacher role is active. Teacher is responsible for providing the best model to the students to imitate. Here the students are going to imitate the audio speaking and learning the foreign language through it. Audiovisual aids proceeds through drilling, exercising and practicing of the language. The next method is natural approach or natural method. This is presented by Stephen Krashen and the Tracky Terrell. Teacher speaks in the target language. Vocabulary learning is the key in the natural method. In this natural approach method, errors in the speaking are not corrected at the time they made it. These mistakes could be given as homework to make it correct, but at the time students are speaking incorrectly, teacher is not going to make the students correct. But as we learned in the situational approach method, teachers are going to correct the students at the same time they are making that mistakes. In this natural approach method, students become comfortable in the class. This method is designed to develop the basic communication skills, both oral or written. Students may use either the language being taught in the class or their first language. That could be their native language or their mother language. This approach allows the student to talk about the ideas. The uses of natural approach. This approach could be used in the task of solving the problem activities, reading aloud, dictation method, paragraph writing, question answer exercises, conversation between the friends,